Hello travelers, Boardman21 here, and today we got the patch notes for patch 8.4, which is dropping tomorrow. It's dropping 11 a.m. for me here locally. There is a link to this forum post in the description below. If you click on it, you go there, it'll convert the time to whichever time zone you are in, and if you know how to do the math just by typing it into Google, you can find it out that way, but it is coming out tomorrow morning. Now, for us, we are going to go ahead and dive into this. We're going to go through it. We're not going to read everything. I'm just going to hit and miss some of the main topics because there are some little details that they added in that we didn't know about, while big portions of it are things we've already covered in other videos. So first off, there's going to be some music playing in the background right now. That is the new Last Epoch main theme. So we're going to have that playing the whole time while I chat. For the dungeons, we all know there's a new dungeon. It's called the Temporal Sanction, that it's coming, but they now told us where it is. It is off the coast of the Ruined Coast, and where that is if you go in Imperial era, you can go to the Shining Cove, go along the side there, you'll hit that time rift. That takes you to the Ruined Coast. You can do that with your characters now to have the portal ready, but you can only go into the dungeon if you have found a key, so make sure you get a key before you go. Dungeon keys can be dropped by rare enemies and timeline bosses in endgame zones, but beware if you die inside the Sanctum or you leave, you'll have to get a new key. And then inside the Sanctum, the boundaries of time are weak. You'll have a new dungeon-specific ability called Temporal Shift, which allows you to transfer between eras while using it, allowing you to reach the deepest depths of the dungeon. And you will get to choose modifiers while exploring the Temporal Sanctum. So I'm not sure when or where you get to choose them inside there, but you do get to add in modifiers as you go, and it has some cool things like enemies drop more exalted relics, which is pretty cool. So then as we go down, you'll get to beat the dungeon. Once you beat it, you get access to the Eternity Cache, and then of course at that point you can try your luck at crafting a cool legendary. Now here's another cool thing. If you reach the end of a Temporal Sanctum, if you actually complete the dungeon, it will proceed you directly to Chapter 9 of the campaign, skipping everything before it. And that's assuming that you're strong enough. If you just go straight into Chapter 9, you might die at that point because you might not have got enough levels. But for your alt characters, this means that if you have keys and then you go to level an alt character, you can skip portions of the campaign, which is really cool, and a lot of people have been asking for that. The Temporal Sanctum has 4 tiers. Higher tiers increase the area level, increasing the power and number of modifiers, and it allows you to unlock the full power of the Eternity Cache. So I believe that the higher tier uniques, and possibly even the amount of affixes that you can put onto one, is something where you're going to have to be in the higher tier Sanctum in order to be able to actually use it with those tier of uniques. And I would assume the higher level ones like Ravenous Void Gloves or like Wings of Argentus is like a tier 4 thing. Quest rewards are going to have the same total number of passive points, but there's now going to be like multiple ways to do it. So you will actually have more quests with more passive points, but it doesn't mean that you can actually exceed the maximum number. It's kind of like the idol slots. You can get idols doing a lot of side quests or from just doing the main campaign, but depending on which way you do it, you might get them early in the game. It's the same thing, but even if you get them earlier and then you do one of those quests later, it doesn't increase the maximum number of idol slots, or in this case, passives, that you would have been able to get. The counters for your progress towards the passive idol slot caps are now shown on the bottom left of the map panel while viewing, so you can see just how many more of them that you need. And then there's a list of the new quests that now give passive points that didn't do it before. Another cool thing, additionally, the Apophis and the Majasa quest now gives +1 to all attributes upon completion. That's right, +1 to all attributes. So by doing those 2 quests, you will be able to get +2 to all of your attributes for finishing out Chapter 9, which is really cool. Then we have the Eternity Cache and the Legendaries, and we've discussed exactly how this works. There's nothing new here. It's all the same. Then for crafting, we've already talked about this. We've gone through the new glyphs. There's more details here, but it's the same as it was. There's going to be no more instability. You're going to have forging potential instead. And then we have new glyphs and new ruins, such as the Glyph of Hope. We also have the Glyph of Despair, some new ruins, the Ruin of Ascendance, the Ruin of Cleansing. And they're going to have new artwork. They're going to be really cool. And then there's some performance-related things to this as well. When you're transferring your shards over to your stash tab, it should be faster and quicker and not lag. So some really cool stuff. We have the Druid reworks. Nothing has really changed here. They tell us that you're going to get a free respec of your skills. It's all kind of the same things that we've already discussed, things you would expect. They did tell us that you'll gain the skill Upheaval. You have access to it at level 14. And then the new skill for the Rogue, the Umbral Blades, you have access to at level 18, which is pretty cool. They did cap the maximum number of vines. So for summon vines, you can only have 12 vines at one time. It is hard capped. You can't have more than that. So that will change the Spriggan a bit, especially from how you play it now if you're doing the vines build. And then rage, some people were asking that your starting rage is equal to your maximum mana. So you do get the same amount of rage as you had mana. So if you have 350 mana, you will start with 350 rage. And then for skill changes, a lot of these are some of the big things. I'm not going to read through every single one of these, but for the most part, nothing seems like it got super hit. They did fix some things. So for instance, there's less chance to apply ailments on hit effects. We're not working for skills such as Warpath and Flurry, so the ailment builds that you currently have with those are probably going to see a little bit less damage. Devouring Orb has a lot of things that were changed in it, and the biggest thing in there is a lot of things seem to reduce the duration of the orbs themselves, which means you probably can't have as many of them active. Outside of that, most things seem to have gained a little bit of damage. So overall, I think that Devouring Orb is still going to be very strong. They did fix some of the bug nodes where some of the ailments and other things were being affected by all of the nodes inside the skill tree for more damage when they shouldn't have been. However, overall, the build should survive. You probably will just have less orbs actually active at the same time, but we'll have to play with it and see, but it should be fine. Edra's Blessing has some changes. There'll be no more crows inside of the skill tree, and there are things, some of the nodes in there, that you must manually cast the skill manually in order to get those effects instead of having it procced, because there will be ways in the next patch to have it procced without manually casting it, kind of like you can do with Smite and the idols when you do throwing skills on the Sentinel. Holy Aura did have a little change, but it had nothing to do with Flame Burst. So Flame Burst, and especially Flame Burst Warpath, should still be very, very strong. It was announced that Ice Thorns was going to be leaving the game, but due to feedback, they're actually keeping Ice Thorns in the game for now. They're making a couple of changes to it, nothing major, but you will actually still have access to Ice Thorns. It will still be in the game. Javelin got a slight buff to some damage. Maelstrom is going to be much, much different. Maelstrom kind of got a rework on its skill tree, and basically it's going to do more damage with fewer stacks. There's also this cool thing where its duration has been reduced, but now if you don't cast it for a while and then you wait till you get some of the buffs, they're called Lagrange's Slumber. As you gain more of these, you can then cast the skill, and it'll cast the skill one time that, or for per stack of Lagrange's Slumber. So there'll be a way to get multiple stacks, kind of like how Warcry does it, where you use Warcry and it gives you like 4 stacks all at once. Kind of like that with this, but you have to wait a longer period of time in order to get that. So they're really doing away with auto casting on this skill, which is good. And then Serpent Strike, there is a slight nerf to it, and that is the cooling point, which you can put 4 points into and get 24% kill threshold. That's been reduced down to 3. So you can only have an 18% kill threshold on it now. So a little nerf to that. Smite had some wording fixes. For Static Orb did get some damage kind of debuff. So what they did to it is they made it to where the orbs now only circle you for 3 seconds instead of 5, but they actually go just as far out. So they actually just made them move faster. Overall, this is going to be, as they said in most scenarios, particularly against large tanky enemies, a damage nerf, which kind of sucks. But we'll see if Static Orb can still be good in the next patch. Swipe and its subskill, the Spirit Wolves, will no longer have its damage scale with your damage, but it will scale with damage inside of the nodes inside of the tree, as well as with minion damage. It does have 150% added minion melee damage effectiveness now to it. Totems will do 12% more damage. Other than that, not too much has changed with them. And then we have the unlock order for the Primalist skills. They did a whole bunch of flip-flopping. Basically, you can have Maelstrom now instead of being at 15 passive points, you can get it at 12. Warcry is at 10 points in the Primalist, from 10 points in the Beastmaster. Stormcrow now unlocks at 15 points in Primalist. For passives, the Primalist Shaman and Blade Dancer have a couple of changes. Obviously, the Druid is going to be completely changed, so they're giving you a free respec for it. The Shaman just had a couple of tooltip fixes. The Blade Dancer is getting some throwing damage added, which is really cool. So there'll be 2 new nodes, or 2 of the same nodes we already had, but they now have added throwing physical damage and increased throwing damage speed instead of only being melee related. They now have melee and throwing. So there is a couple of nodes that will now have throwing support inside of the Blade Dancer, which will definitely help with the new skill Umbral Blades. For the Monolith of Fate, the spirals will now only attack the player while they're in combat, not if you're just running around not in combat or just standing still. And they added in 10 new random echo layouts. I believe what this means is in the Monolith of Fate, we will have 10 new areas, or 10 areas where they will actually be RNG based. It'll be different when you run them, which sounds really, really cool. I don't know if those are based off the dungeon or what, but hopefully this means that it should change things up a bit for the Monolith of Fate, at least a little bit. For the campaign, they've reworked the Chapter 5 zones, the Ruined Coast, the Majelka, the Sapphire Quarter, the Oracle's Abode, the Majelkan Catacombs, and the Way Station all now have updated visual areas. And here for the Way Station, you can see the new one. It looks really, really good. They fixed some visuals. And then for the character select screen, this is huge. The new character select screen looks amazing, and I can't wait to see it in game. You can see the new character models. He's got the bear he's petting there. The mage is floating. I think it looks really, really cool. Let me know in the comments below if you really like the new character select screen, but I think it looks really, really cool. For items, they renamed the polearms to spears. They're going to replace all spear and staff base types. That includes new visuals and stats for them. The Sentinel will have 2 new sets, and one of them will be the starting set that you wear, so you should look much different. You're the first time playing Sentinel with just that base gear. The Acolyte has 1 new set of body armor and helmet visuals coming, and higher tier armor and helmets should, for the Mage, Acolyte, and Primalist, more consistently use higher tier models, meaning the higher level you are and the higher bases you're wearing, the better you should look. Higher quality stuff. For the uniques, there are 16 new uniques, which we've covered almost all of them that they've teased us. Boulder's Wrath is getting another nerf. Now there will be a 5-second internal cooldown on using Earthquake, meaning that the weapon, no matter if you find multiple movement skills to do or if you found a movement skill that's really fast, no matter what, you can only have it go off once every 5 seconds, and it now requires you to be level 76 instead of 75. The Eternity Eclipse has gone up from a level requirement of 36 to 72. Edera's Path, the Primalist boots that are for entangling roots in the vines, now works differently. The vines will now use or scale with the summoned vines in the Spriggan Forms skill tree. On top of that, they increase the chance that they can roll for it. The healing effectiveness has been nerfed quite a bit. You do get more health from the pair of boots, and then you also get 3 vines that are summoned rather than 1 when the vines do go off, and remember there is a cap of 12 on those now. And then there are a few items that obviously give you mana back for certain things, which when you're transformed will now be for rage instead, like the Legacy of the Quiet Forest will give you rage every 3 seconds in Spriggan form instead of mana. And then there's just some little number changes going on with a few other things. Set items, overall, all set items seem to have been buffed fairly high. They've increased either the damage they were giving you or their set effects, whatever effects were on them. A lot of them have been buffed quite comparatively, but I still don't think that a lot of them will even come close to competing with a legendary item or even a really powerful exalted or even a fixed rare item, which is crazy. And then we had some enemies scaling. So enemies damage globally in the entire game will deal about 1% more damage and have 2% more health. And then the level damage scaling, enemies are going to do more damage kind of in the mid game, and they're going to do no changes below level 30, and then at the end game they do about 2% more. For the health scaling, there's no change below 30. Mid game, they're going to have about 1 to 2% more, and then about 1% more at the end game. Rare enemies, enemies that originally appeared early in the game have more health than before, as rare enemies in the end game increases damage multiplier to 185% from 180. Basically, things are going to do a little bit more damage, or rare enemies will have a little bit more damage and more health in the game. On top of this, remember that if you're thinking Chapter 9 mobs, all those mobs are getting a lot of decreases. In fact, Chapter 7, 8, and 9 mobs had a lot of their stats reduced, both damage and health. And here for the Chapter 9 ones, you can see everything basically does less damage, has less health. You can see all the numbers. Everything has a big damage nerf going to it for Chapter 9. And then for the chapter 2 and 3 enemies, they get a bit of damage and more health, which is kind of cool for some of them. So it should be a little bit more challenging in chapter 2 and 3. For chapter 4, 5, and 6, a lot of things got less damage, but some more health. So some things got more health. The biggest thing that I don't like is the immortal eyes, or the eyeballs as we call them, have 8% more damage and 11% more health. I already didn't like them to begin with. I don't like that one at all, but you can see that most things tend to get a little bit less damage, like the centrals and the arbalist, and some things got more. Chapters 7 and 8 was mostly less damage or health for almost everything. You can see less on all of them. And then for the end game bosses, God Hunter Argentus gets more damage, and Hearten's Husk also gets a more damage boost. Then for mechanics, block is seeing a bit of a change. The aim was to make it to where shields basically wouldn't be the most powerful legendaries ever, because some of the shields in the game, like Bastion of Honor, are already very, very strong. They reduced the value of block chance affix by around 14%. They also increased the block effectiveness values on the hybrid block chance and effectiveness affixed by 20%, and that mostly comes to the adding affixes, not the base of shields. But some of the shields they did change around. The Carapace shield grants 28% block chance from 27, Iron Glass is 35 instead of 33, and the Dawn shield is now 30 from 28. So overall, I think it's going to feel pretty much the same, but we'll have to see once we actually craft some. I assume tier 6, tier 7 affixes are going to be quite a bit lower. And then there's a slight change to the way damage taken from critical strikes will visually appear. Mechanically, it's going to work the same, but now you're going to see the affix called less damage taken from crits, less bonus damage taken from crits, not just less damage. So what this means is it will naturally cap at 100% now instead of that 50% less damage taken from crits that you see now. They are essentially the same thing, and every affix in the game basically has doubled its potential to get to 100%. So it should be exactly the same as it was. But what this means is a critical strike does twice as much damage as a normal hit. So if you take away 100% of the bonus damage, then it goes back to just being a normal hit for you. It's just going to look different, sound different, but it's the exact same thing that's happening. For shrines, there's the shrine that gives you the beetle, would normally give you 1 or 2 beetles. It will now always only give you 1, but there's a new shrine called the Frozen Hive, which will give 3 to 5 ice beetles, which is a little weird. So we have 2 ice beetle type shrines. One will give you only 1, and 1 can give you 3 to 5. And then there's another rare type of shrine that's been added, but we don't know what it is, and they don't tell us. And then there's a lot of other little changes they make. Some of them, like the player stun chance is going up to 200% for melee and 100% for non-melee, from 100% to from 150 respectively to 200 and 100. And stunned enemies and minions no longer have their stun duration refreshed by subsequent hits that would have stunned again, which means once you've been stunned until you're unstunned, you can't be stunned again. You can't like perma-stun things. I mean, you still technically can, but you have to hit after the stun is up, so there will be a break in it for you there. So a little bit different way of working with stun there. And then they gave a slight buff to the number of bees per 10 bees, or per 10 seconds when bees were created. They will now summon 3 to 7 for the idols instead of 2 to 4. So you should be getting some more. There was a bug where you could get 50% more bees, so it should be roughly the same as it was. Then there's a whole bunch of new music and sounds for things like player hits and all of that. We're not going to go into every single one of those, but the game should be sounding better with a lot of things. They have like a new slashing sound for slash attacks, which is pretty cool. Probably has a lot to do with the new transformation that we have, the Swarm Blade. And then they have some new controller support. They have some better optimization, a lot of it with crafting stuff, some of it with minion performance. And you can read, there's not a whole lot, but there is some performance gains to be had in this. And then there's just an absolute ton of bug fixes. So I'm not going to read every single one of those. Like I said, this link will be in the description below. You can check it out. But just know that a lot of things are being fixed. So if you had a problem with something or a bug and you were hoping it was fixed, make sure to check out the list because it might have been. And that is going to be it for the patch notes. We're not going to go into the details for the little nitty-gritty things. But overall, not a lot of nerfs to a lot of skills. Devouring Orb, possibly. I think it's still going to work quite well, but we'll have to play with it, see how that new duration feels, see how the hit damage versus the bug with all damage for everything feels. Overall, I think that a lot of builds will be surviving into the next patch. Anyways, let me know in the comments below what you're most excited about. Let me know if you really like that character screen, because I think it looks amazing. As always, stay safe, and hope to see you tomorrow when we stream the new patch. As always, have a good day.